Hey there, thanks for sticking around for the latest episode of Thacknology, where I enjoy talking to the makers of the world's real seats of power. And that's a little inkling as to where this episode goes. A few days ago I talked to Jon Yablonski, who is a front-end designer. For those uninitiated in the arts of the web, that's making incredible experiences for us users. And I was going to call this show Detroit, Design and Disney, because that talks about what we talked about, Jon and I, when we sat down on Sunday.
I can't look at type without, trying to figure out what typeface it is, or is the kerning correct, or I definitely examine the world through the eyes of a designer.
To really talk about where we are with design today, and then the conversation shifted to the world of real design.
I think it comes back to timeless design principles. I mean, I think that Dieter Rams, he laid out the criteria that all his product work had to meet while working for Braun, and I think that their products definitely, they feel like Apple products before the time of Apple, right?
Versus the virtual design that we all seem obsessed with these days. So we started talking about brands and that tangible feel to design, the stuff that you can touch, the stuff that you can feel for real. And that got me thinking that one of my favourite brands is Herman Miller. I just love the way those seats feel when you sat down, and we talked, Jon and I, about that sense of flow. And I think that when you're in a really good chair, that intimates this sense of flow. It gives you the catalyst to just find that incredible space. It's like that centre of the X where everything just happens and you lose yourself for hours on end. And Jon will talk about that later in the show and what it means to him as a frankly fabulous designer. Going back to Herman Miller, I decided to go and have a chat with Stephen Perkins, who's the Vice President of Research, Design and Development at Herman Miller. Itself an incredible success story. It's been going for literally over 100 years, 56 years as Herman Miller. And right now they're celebrating the reiteration of one of their most fabulous working chairs called the Aeron. Anybody sat on it, you'll know exactly what I mean when I gush with praise. It really is in the Thacknology pantheon of perfect products.
When you're remastering something like the Aeron, which is such an iconic piece of design, you have to look at every aspect of the chair. You want to keep the iconic look of the chair. Customers have bought this product for the last 20 plus years. They want to be able to buy the new Aeron to put in their offices and sit alongside the original Aeron in a great way. It's seamless. That's what they want to be able to do.
Let's kick things off with Jon, and then later on, let's bring Stephen in and talk about really why your bum deserves better. This has been a long time in the making. It feels like a lifetime just trying to fix this up. And here you are on a Sunday afternoon. How's life?
Life is awesome.
I bet. You are such an inspiration. You don't even know it.
Well, thank you.
I've just been talking to Jon. I'm really excited to share him with you. Because as you know, here on Thacknology, we only talk to the best. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave.
What's on your mind today?
Well, I'm a father, so the kids keep me young. They keep me moving. I really like to dive into ideas on the weekend, and I got a lot of good stuff cooking up right now I'm really excited about.
Well, it sounds like we're on a bit of a cooking bent. You've heard about me fresh from the kitchen. I'm sweating. I don't know whether I'm sweating through excitement or just sweating. And the roast chicken that's just been going down, so exceptional stuff. Jon, we have many things in common. You're clearly a technology fan. You've done some amazing work, and we're going to dig into that later on. Front-end design is your game these days, and I get a little bit confused. I wanted to pare things back. How would you describe design? What exactly is design?
That's a fabulous question, Dave. I think really what it comes down to is design is about communication, and communicating as clearly as you possibly can a message. So, I mean, if I was to boil it down to just one phrase, it would be, it's all about communication.
How long did you study design, if you like, before you realised that this was what was going to make you who you are today?
Well, I mean, I felt like for, as a kid drawing and stuff, I was always kind of drawn to art, and I didn't really have a concept of what design was back then. And, it took a while to kind of learn over time that, really what I'd been doing the whole time was designing, whether it was band logos or just drawing letters or even characters. You're kind of designing these shapes and forms, and you're playing with these things, and you think it's art, and I certainly did, and therefore I went to an art school to kind of push that even further, and realized really quickly what I had been doing the whole time had been design. So I spent 5 years at Memphis College of Art, and really got to try a lot of different things: photography, painting, printmaking, and then of course design. But design was always the one thing I was coming back to over and over again.
That's insane. So design is almost influenced by life itself then, because you've got a pretty rich life, haven't you?
I try to be diversified and get a lot of different world experiences and try different things and just kind of keep my mind open, because really design, like art, is everywhere, and there's no shortage of inspiration in the world.
Design feels like it's best done by people who are sure of themselves. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it takes time to really kind of, develop your own personal design language. And you can be fluent in that and speak in many different dialects. So whether it's, you're doing client work or you're doing these experimental projects like, Swiss and CSS, you start to respond to the things that that you're really drawn to. And I think that passion is really what helps define that personal design language, that really kind of permeates all the work that you do.
How do you know when the project is right?
There's going to be highs and lows with every project. For me, I know it's gelling when I just can't put it down and I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah. I certainly kind of get this obsessive, like I'm constantly working it out in my mind, and whether or not I'm sketching ideas or designing behind the screen, I'm working through problems in the project, and that's when I know I got something really good.
There must be a moment when you're in flow.
Absolutely. I savor those moments, because that's when magic really happens. When you're locked in and you're just, you're pushing it as far as you can. And next thing you know, hours and hours have went by, and that's a good thing. And then sometimes, my wife doesn't always enjoy that, but she understands it. And I think sometimes that's what it really takes to reach the meat of and potatoes of that idea, the core of what it is you're really trying to do, and break through with that idea.
Is there a design bloodline running through the Yablonski ancestry? Are you the first in a long line of people who's really got this?
I absolutely am. I come from a long line of blue collar workers, and design was something that was kind of art in general, something new to my family. But I had an incredibly encouraging support base. My mom was amazing, and they really pushed me to pursue this and go to art school and really just not really worry about if it's something that's new or different from compared to what all the other kids were doing where I was from. It was they really encouraged me to not worry about that and to go all in.
Is it true with designers that you have a different way of looking at the world that I guess is hewn from your professional focus? You see life through a different lens.
I can't look at type without, trying to figure out what typeface it is, or is the kerning correct? Or I definitely examine the world through the eyes of a designer, whether I even know I'm doing it or not. Color palettes and sometimes just, the ambiance of an environment, like, the sound even, it transcends the visual sometimes. And that's what's really interesting to me is, transcending what is traditionally thought of as design and kind of trying to bridge that into this, new age of design that kind of encompasses all the senses. So now we have, voice technology and artificial intelligence and machine learning, all these things of which I think designers, will play a very vital role in. And I think that getting inspiration from everywhere is absolutely essential.
It's amazing to me. Being a designer sounds like being a drug taker without the drugs. You've got that cheap ticket because you get all the benefits. Very smart, seeing life through a technicolor lens, but at the same time not having to worry about the down payment. I love that. You're just on a different plane in the way that you look at things, and that must make conversation so interesting because you never run out of things to talk about, but you always look at things with a different perspective.
Thank you, Dave. I definitely always have something that I'm working through in my mind, and that really drives a lot of the things that I'm doing in life at the time. I kind of take, like I said, taking inspiration from all over. So I think that my work is such a part of me as a person that it definitely comes through in conversations. And I obviously have people in my life that aren't necessarily interested in design, but I would say that my conversations are definitely affected by what I do as a career, because I think it definitely I've chosen a profession that I think agrees with my personality, and I've let it envelop me 100%, and I'm really happy about that.
First of all, thank you for listening to Thacknology. We're sat here in a charming little bedroom surrounded by guitars. You're all having a fantastic time, I'm sure, listening in, because Jon is a design wonderkind. I don't think I'm overstating the fact that I'm having an absolutely fantastic time talking to him, learning all about what he's done so far. And I want to ask Jon, because this is a Sunday, and it's very kind of you to give us some of your time on a Sunday, because Sunday time is family time. What's an average family day out in the Yablonski household? Where would you go? What would you do? And do you do things different because you are a designer?
Wow, I've never really thought about that. I mean, a typical Sunday is gonna involve a little bit of Disney in the mornings, and
Nice.
and eventually will lead to dancing and singing.
What about the kids?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. So, and then on a sunny day, we got a park right down the street. I actually live in a part of a suburb of Detroit that's surrounded by excellent mid-century modern architecture.
Wow.
I live right down the street from a Frank Lloyd Wright home that is just unbelievable, and you wouldn't even know it's there unless you stumbled across it. So, just kind of exploring the area and finding these little hidden gems of mid-century architecture is pretty fantastic. And of course, my kids aren't entirely into that. They just love to explore along with Daddy.
You know what? Every day's a school day. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Absolutely.
You sound like you should be the world's best Airbnb host, because there's clearly money in it. We're paying some guy when we're going to Nashville, we're paying him a small fortune to go and stay in what I presume amounts to be his loft. So, yeah, something there, I think.
Nice.
Just purely selfishly, and there'll be a lot of people who want to know about this as well. What's it like living in Detroit now compared to, say, 10 or 15 years ago? Has it changed beyond recognition, or is it still the same sort of fighting community spirit?
I mean, that's a great question, Dave. I haven't been here for I got here in October of 2014.
Wow.
I'd moved with my wife. She was a nurse, and we decided to travel the country, and we landed in Colorado and had a blast there, lived there for several years, and then came back to her home, which is here in Detroit. And it does. It looks a lot different from the Detroit that has been described to me of 10 or 15 years ago. I think that what I've really enjoyed about being here is that it's just got such a scrappy mentality here. Detroit's managed to hit the rock bottom, and there's only one way to go from the bottom, and that's up. And I think that the communities here, you've seen a revival in community. in innovation because they have to.
Sure.
It's been quite inspiring actually to see the things happen in Detroit that I've just never seen anywhere else.
And I guess it takes the pioneers and the change makers and the visionaries and the thinkers like yourself to come in and just inject that fresh perspective into life. I guess it helps. Do you get a lot of time to go out there and hang out with people who just have different things going on and you start reshaping the city over again? I mean, here in the UK, meetups, Manchester, talking about my home city here, we all get together and so much good stuff is done, and you feel that rich seam of enterprise and of change does actually percolate out across the entire city. It radiates, and I think even though you probably don't even realize that you're doing it, you're making a big difference.
Absolutely. I think that Detroit definitely exemplifies that in my mind right now. They're just everywhere you look, there's something new and different going on, and people are deciding, they're not going to go to San Francisco, they're not going to go to New York when they graduate. They're going to come back home to Detroit, or people like me that are not from here at all and find myself here and am quite happy with that. It's definitely. It takes innovators and forward-thinking people that are incredibly optimistic and see opportunity in the current state of Detroit that really thrive here.
When I first discovered the Webfield Manual, which is one of Jon's stunning creations, I was rapt. And then I heard all about the redesign on Medium, which, incidentally, if you've not checked it out yet, is like Newspapers 3.0. It's fantastic. It's where the real stuff happens. But when I discovered, Jon, about all the stuff that you've done and how you got to where you are now, it blew my mind, because you call it a side project. Yet, if you were a big business producing that as your single means to revenue, you'd be pretty happy with what you've achieved, and yet you go about it as though it's just, it's a hobby. How on earth? I mean, I've read about it, and I know a lot of people won't have yet, and that's why I want to crack the code for people listening. But tell us how Webfield Manual came about, because it's become, I'm sure, so much bigger than even you dared dream it was.
Oh, absolutely. It came about quite, accidentally. I was at a conference in San Francisco, an event apart. I was sent there from by my employer at the time, and I was asked to kind of give a presentation upon coming back of what I learned there, and I realized really quickly that what I would create in that presentation would be a deck, a PDF that would get seen one time and probably never again be referenced. And so what I decided to do instead was put that time and energy into making a website where anybody could reference it and see it. And so I went about collecting resources that I was often kind of, sending to people or recommending. And then, of course, all the information I had gleaned from this conference, and collected it and gave it a spin, gave it a design aesthetic that I was kind of wanting to play with at the time, which was this kind of campy. I was in Colorado, so I was definitely influenced by a lot of what was in Colorado, what I was seeing in Colorado at the time, and what resulted was the first version of the Webfield Manual, it absolutely exploded. I had no idea it would get the kind of attention it got, and I was very, very thankful for that. And I've kept it up to date, regularly added resources and pushed content, tried new things with it every week since May 2014.
There are a lot of people who wait for your update, who wait for you to tell us what's happening, not only in your world, but what's happening in the wider world, so that we can learn together as a community. How would you describe it? Because it's the greatest challenge, is to say, well, it's just this or it's just that, because it's a study in Jon, I think. I think it's a study into what goes on in your mind, but also it's about the beating heart of the web, isn't it?
I mean, there's so much out there, and I really just wanted to find a way to give back to people that were, I wanted to create the resource that I was looking for in my younger years on the web, when I was looking for good information, reliable information that was curated for me in a way that I could reference in a spot that I could reference over and over. And I think that that definitely drove some of my thinking when it came to building the Webfield manual.
Webfieldmanual.com. Get over there. Guaranteed it's worth your while. And check out, we'll have in the show notes as well, a link to the redesign, because the amount of time and effort you actually put into just the redesign and the stratospheric differences between the then and the now, you must be thinking, I want the web to stand still in a way, because what you've learned and what you show off is so of the moment. And yet, invariably, we know that next year, next month, next week, things are going to change beyond recognition. Does that not frustrate you a little bit?
At the same time, it's a good thing. I think we work in a really quickly evolving industry, and that's a sign of growth. And I'm very thankful for that. At the same time, there's always something new and shiny that you might need to learn. And what I really try to use the Webfield manual for is, in part, kind of selfishly documenting the kind of resources I think are going to be timeless, the kind of things that no matter where the industry goes in terms of the latest and greatest JavaScript library or design tool, there's this timeless information that is there and collected in one spot that is always there for you to reference. And I think that I find myself quite often coming across something I think it's going to be of value to me and other people a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. And that's the kind of stuff that I try to collect on the Webfield manual.
This talk of timelessness is so rare in this world which we inhabit, and that's what I love about it so much. And I don't forget, this is probably just about the best ever CV, Jon, because it shows that you know the hell that you're talking about. There ain't many people who can stake that claim these days, so bravo on that. Where does design go next? And that's kind of a veiled question, because I don't know whether it stays the same and iterates, or whether you think we're on the vanguard of a brand new frontier that nobody's really charted yet.
Oh, I think it's a little bit of both, Dave. I mean, there's fundamentals that will never change, and I think that designers are incredibly receptive to those things, details, and how things flow, how things feel, and then above all else, how the user experiences, whether it's a UI or a touch interface, a voice recognition. I think that the skills of designers is only going to kind of expand and diversify to fit these different form factors that we have to take into consideration. And I've always actually thought of designers as kind of like Swiss Army knives. They have these fundamental tools that can be adapted to a wide variety of situations and technology. And I think that what you'll see is designers doing exactly that. They're gonna grow and expand into these new frontiers, these new pieces of technology, and they're gonna figure out how to adapt them into their workflow and thinking, just like they have the more traditional tools. Designers had to make a big shift to digital. I remember doing print design. It seems
come on, you're only 25. Stop lying.
So I started off doing traditional kind of branding and print design, and I came out with that mindset. And to be honest with you, Dave, I kind of miss that tactility of paper and print and ink and being at the printer and working with my hands. But I think that the skills that I have from that have kind of worked their way and infused into the digital work I'm doing now. And I think that designers now and designers in the future will learn to adapt these same skill sets to all these other technologies. So, you hear augmented reality or virtual reality or AI, all these different acronyms that kind of can be a little intimidating in terms of what is a designer's role in this. And I think what you'll find, I predict, is that designers will do the same thing they've done always, and that is adapt and curate the experience around the user and be invaluable to the team.
Is there one thing that you love, and it could be a brand or it could be a specific instrument, that you feel really defines design in a tangible sense?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many things, Dave.
Braun. I love the Braun watches. They used to make watches. They make clocks, and obviously these days they tend to make personal hygiene products, which is great. But it's just so horrendously contemporary, yet at the same time, these things were made like 50, 60 years ago. How can that be?
I think it comes back to timeless design principles. I mean, I think that Dieter Rams, he laid out the criteria that all his product work had to meet while working for Braun, and I think that, I think that their products definitely they feel like Apple products before the time of Apple, right?
Yeah,
they just
exactly.
they have that timeless, like Steve Jobs was quoted. He was mentioning a story about his father, and he was mentioning how his father said that you have to paint, when you're building a fence, you paint both sides of the fence, even the side that you don't see. And the reason you do that is because you know it's there, and it has to be perfect. And I think that just uncompromising attention to detail is fundamental in product design, in graphic design, in web design. I think that speaks volumes and really kind of elevates whatever the end product is from being mediocre to being timeless.
Yeah, if I was going to push you, is there anything that you would say really makes you think, you know what, if I'm going to make one thing in my lifetime, that is what I'd like it to be?
One thing I've always had a deep affinity for is posters. And I've always collected posters, and I some of my favorite posters would be from the Bauhaus Museum in Berlin. And it's one of my favorite posters is that classic yellow poster with Kandinsky on it. I think that would probably be kind of the bar for me in terms of, timeless design and just really appreciating what the end product is. I rock that poster on every wall, no matter where I've lived in the world, because I love it so much. I have to see it every day. I think that would probably be my bar.
The last question I've got to ask you is about you and where the journey next takes you, Jon. I mean, I don't really even know your situation and where your path leads to, but is there something coming downstream that you're really excited about, or have you got a project in mind that is going to define 2017 and beyond for you?
I think so. I've really kind of come full circle and realized that multiple passions are kind of converging into the same kind of ideas and projects, and that's when I really think I've got something good. I remember a point in college toward the end of my journey in college was I realized that I could work on a single project and kind of address all these different disciplines and classes that I was a part of. And that's how I knew I was really kind of maturing. And I've come to that point professionally now, almost 10 years later, in a kind of entirely different way, where I've fully embraced this digital environment, and where I'm kind of starting to lean toward is this idea of digital storytelling, and really just kind of taking, pivoting away from the user interfaces and solving client problems that I do, at my day job, to really kind of focusing on, how can I really tell a story and elicit emotional responses from people, and just kind of pivoting the conversation away from them finding information on a website, whether it's any website really, like an insurance website or a museum, to something that's more about storytelling and telling this narrative that unfolds as you kind of dive into the experience. And that's really what I'm kind of interested in right now is how do you go about designing these experiences that unfold stories as opposed to just delving into information.
Jon, you are talking my language. What a perfect place to finish. And you nearly have one last question. If we, and I know so that means that there'll be several thousand other people who feel the same way, want to scratch under the surface of design and understand a little bit more about design itself, is there a book or a website, web field manual maybe, where people can go and suddenly see the light, have that epiphany and go, yeah, maybe I'm going to start looking at the world through design eyes?
Yeah,
I love that tumbleweed there. That was great. Now with sound effects.
If I was to respond to that, it would be websites that I probably reference all the time. Fast Company does an excellent job, I think, of really just scratching a little bit beyond the surface into really what the meaning of design is. And, they have the design specific portion of their online presence that I think does a fantastic job of curating all these ideas around design. And I think the takeaway really is that design it permeates all the things around us. It really extends beyond just the visual, but it can be intrinsic with our products or our experiences, or whether it's a retail experience. I mean, I remember listening to Jared Spohl talk about the Apple Store and how they really designed the customers' experience in Apple stores, and really just flip that retail experience on its head. And I think that you'll find these kind of ideas on the Fast Company blog. To name several, there's several others. Obviously, Wired Magazine always does a fantastic job. There's no shortage of design inspiration on the web.
Well, the cup has finally runneth dry. We've had what I think is probably one of the most enchanting experiences through Thacknology and any of the other radio shows that we've been involved with. And I just want to extend that genuine thanks to Jon Yablonski.com. And you can also find him on Twitter at Jon Yablonski. You can't go wrong. Jon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Anytime, Dave. Thank you.
I finished off my conversation with Jon talking about the brands that matter and things that really get him going as a designer, now as a worker. Things that get me going are 2 monitors and somewhere where I can plonk my very well upholstered behind. And there's been nowhere better for my derriere than the Aeron. I've not tried the brand new one yet, and that's because it's brand new. It's only recently been launched to the world, and I got a bit of a sneak peek from Stephen Perkins, the Vice President of Research, Design and Development for Herman Miller. So join me and let's talk Aeron. Well, when you're up against 130 trillion web pages, as Google reported yesterday, that's some job. You need to put yourself first and sit comfortably. Now, Herman Miller's Aeron has long been the choice of the corporate chair connoisseur, but now I think it's an even more irresistible choice. I'm not going to ask you to sit tight because, as I mentioned before, the man is in the hot seat here to tell us more. So, Stephen, what sit all about? Tell us about the new Aeron.
Well, the new Aeron really is a accumulation of all of the knowledge and all of the experience we've had in designing world-class task chairs over the last 20 to 30 years. When Aeron first came to market, obviously it was a total innovation in the marketplace. But since then, we learn new things, we've experienced new things, and new Aeron is really bringing all that together to try and improve what was already a fantastic chair, but take it to the next level.
Now, I believe Bill Stumpf famously said, he's the designer, I believe, he designed the chair for himself, which to me seems like common sense. But for somebody who is expert like yourself, Stephen, in design, what would you say is the secret of the Aeron, both past and present?
I think the Aeron really is is really at the spearhead, or the pinnacle, if you want to put it that, of ergonomic excellence, the understanding of how a person sits in a chair, how we respond, the behavior and behave in a chair.
Sure.
All of those things brought together, and all of that ergonomic learning that we've had, it makes Aeron the chair it is. It's been right at that level for the last 20 years, and the aim of this new project of New Aeron is to actually just take that to the next level. So that's what we think the chair is going to do, and we hope that New Aeron will be just as successful as the original Aeron.
Looking back and looking ahead, because you are quite a firm, as it happens, you've got more than 100 years of experience in different guises, 56 years, I believe, as Herman Miller. What do you think it takes these days for the modern worker to build a great seating space? Because there are so many discussions these days about active desks, and I know Herman Miller was a pioneer in that space in itself. It seems like you've virtually single-handedly invented the office, but for the worker today who's chained more than ever to the desk, what do you think it takes really, and what's Herman Miller's vision on what it takes to make the modern worker comfortable?
I think what we're learning through the research work we do, and we're obviously continually looking to that research, both ergonomic and anthropometric. So all of that research brought together shows us that people need to change posture during the day. They need to shift and move around because they get heat up in their bodies. Their muscles, as that heat generates, their muscles start to stiffen. And what we want to do is keep them loose, keep everything moving and active. So Aeron was designed really to facilitate that with its pellicle mesh on the chair. That pellicle system allows the body to breathe, stay cool, and keep those muscles nice and supple. But also what we're learning now is actually the idea of people moving around. So sitting in one place for a short period, moving to another place, maybe standing for a short period of time, or sitting for a short period of time. So all of those things together contribute to somebody feeling well, hopefully being ergonomically supported in that environment. And I think all of our learning over the years is we're trying to bring all that together. And Aeron, even though you're sitting for periods of time, we're trying to take that ergonomic learning, put you into what we call a sort of a power posture. So the idea is that you're sitting slightly further forward than original Aeron had. That means that your spine is in better alignment. And we also have something called Posture Fit. And Posture Fit aligns the spine correctly and puts you in that position where you can sit for longer periods of time, feel comfortable for longer periods of time. But of course, we do understand that people do want to move around, they do want to stand up. But what we're trying to do is that in those times where they are sitting, they're supported in the right way.
You're not only about the office, you've developed sofas. You've created different ways for people to enjoy many different environments. Herman Miller seems to be going through a hell of an evolution, really, because you just seem to kind of reinvent yourself in the right ways. And you see, like, I presume it's going down to all the research that you're doing on an ongoing basis. With the Action Office, you created the modern office cubicle back in the 60s. Not yourself, Stephen, but certainly Herman Miller did. Do you see the workplace changing again in the future? Do you see this being something that Herman Miller will constantly be saying at the forefront of? Or do you see the corporate environment really diffusing into people's homes? What's the plan, do you think, for how we work today and into the future?
I think that's a very big question, but there are multiple things happening around the world, and it's different in different regions as well. As a global company, we see different trends in Asia, in Europe, in North America, in South America. So all of these regions are experiencing slightly different changes. But I think one thing we know at Herman Miller is that constant change is here to stay. So things are always evolving, they're always moving forward, they're always shifting. And what we try and do through our research is to understand some of those social changes. George Nelson said that design is a response to social change. And I think that what we try and do is understand that change, look at what's going on, and then design our products to help support and facilitate that change. If you get that right, then obviously you're going to be very successful. And that's what we're always trying to do, is be on the leading edge if we can, so we can respond to those changes, but also provide maybe a vision of where things could go in the future.
Going back to the Aeron chair briefly, looking at how it sits now, Got to be a random pun in there somewhere, hasn't there? Where would you say, Stephen, is the team most proud? What are the features really, or is it just holistically the whole team, the Herman Miller team who's focused on the Aeron chair, is actually pleased with the most? What do you think your customers are going to be most happy with in this new guise?
I'm not sure there's one thing. I think you're right. I think there's a whole series of things. When you're remastering something like the Aeron, which is such an iconic piece of design, you have to look at every aspect of the chair. You want to keep the iconic look of the chair. Customers have bought this product for the last 20 plus years. They want to be able to buy the new Aeron to put in their offices and sit alongside the original Aeron in a great way. It's seamless. That's what they want to be able to do. But we want to be able to take all of that learning and build in new ergonomics. So, we've redesigned the tilt mechanism. That's the mechanism that makes the chair work. So the tilt's smoother. It's a better ride. It's been, its position in space, I guess we say, has been inclined slightly. So our learning has shown us that we just needed to make some changes there. It's easier to use. So, right from that engine that drives the chair through to the new 4-zone pellicle, which we have on the chair, we're learning about ergonomics, the way the body reacts, the way we need to support it through the spine. So that's been redesigned. The new material technologies, which gives the chair a better feel, a better ride. We can actually achieve better look on the chair as well, even through the new CMF, which is colours, materials, and finishes. So all of those things have been brought together. So I wouldn't say, Dave, it's one thing. It's a combination of all of these things. We've looked at every aspect of the chair, tried to improve it where we can with our knowledge to make it, again, hopefully, the best chair in the world.
Is it fair to say then, Stephen, that the Aeron may make people more productive?
Well, we like to think that the way we design the chair helps the body to be in a better posture, which hopefully will make you feel more relaxed, and the need for you to change around, move, and shift around in your chair will be reduced. I mean, the pellicle is really the key ingredient of that, because the pellicle allows the body to breathe. And as I said earlier, it's like sitting, I guess, in a cinema seat, where if you're there for a couple of hours, often all that padding and all of that foam and fabric, all of that makes the body heat up. Those muscles heat up. They then stiffen up slightly. That's why you feel slightly uncomfortable if you've been sitting there for a few hours. Aeron takes that away. So whether it actually makes them more productive is a difficult one to prove. But what we believe, hopefully it makes them healthier. And if they're feeling healthier and more comfortable, hopefully they'll be less distracted. And in theory, that should improve their productivity levels.
I know, because I am an accustomed user of the Aeron chair. Whenever I go to see some of my guys over in Manchester and we sit down for a good meeting, they have their meeting room peopled with Aeron chairs and they swear by it. It's a wonderful piece of kit. Love it to bits. And I'm curious about what Herman Miller thinks will be the future of, we talked about the office, but the future of the company itself. Have you got any plans, or are you privy to any information that you can share with us about where you think Herman Miller might go next, whether it's a specific product line or just into a different direction or amplifying its reach?
Obviously, I can't really share with you all of the new products that we're working on. There are many. We have a large R&D capability that is located around the world, working on many different projects, and our research is pointing us in a number of different directions. So we explore those areas, we explore new ideas and new thinking, and then bring those ideas and concepts to the business to see whether we think commercially they're going to be a good thing to do. As far as new direction, Herman Miller's doing what it's always done, which is hopefully develop human-centered, great design. We try and build our products around what we think people need, where we think things are changing. That social change I mentioned earlier on, the change of people's working habits. We try and respond to all those things. So, at the moment we still believe that we can keep on improving, keep on changing, keep on developing as a business, but no real shift in our direction. We can see that the world is shifting around us, and as a company, we're just prepared to change and hopefully keep developing great products to respond to those changes.
You're listening to Stephen Perkins, the Vice President of Research, Design and Development for Herman Miller, and we've cornered him for quite some time, and we're going to let him go now and grab some lunch. Much deserved restitution. So thank you, Stephen, for that. But just before we do finish, with Bill Stumpf again, the designer of the original chair, I believe, he said he knew when his butt felt good, and he said the mark of a great chair is when people say, I want to sit on that really bad. Fair to say, Stephen, I imagine that your chair at the office may be an Aeron?
My chair at home is an Aeron. My chair currently in the office, we have all of our different chairs throughout the offices. I currently sit on an embody chair, and all of these chairs are designed with the same passion around trying to give people the best ride and the best sit that we possibly can. So Aeron's been part of my DNA. I joined the company the same year that Aeron was launched. It's been part of my life for all that time.
Wow.
And as I said, my chair of choice at home is an Aeron, like you. So it's a great chair. It does exactly what it needs to do for me. And hopefully it will continue for another 20 to 30 years and still giving the great levels of comfort that everyone deserves.
Listeners, we've promised you ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and Stephen Perkins, no exception there. Herman Miller's Vice President of Research, Design and Development. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I can't wait to sit down and listen to this again, Stephen. Thanks very much, and continued success to you and Herman Miller.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for listening to today's show. Had a blast. I hope you have too, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming you back for the next episode of this season of Thacknology. If you've got something to talk about that's in the worlds of now, if you're a thinker, if you're a pioneer and innovator, if you've just got something that you're really proud of that you want to share with the world, talk to me. hello@davethackray.com. That's because I'm your host, Dave Thackeray, or you can tweet me at Dave Thackeray. That'd be just as good. Really excited, as I say, to see what comes next. Have yourself a great week, and let's hear each other soon. Bye for now.